Hello, I'm Kevin, VK6 Lima Whiskey, and just like to share with you an antenna that I've had some success with in the past. This is an off-center fed dipole, originally designed for 160 and 80 meters. I put this antenna up about 10 years ago, quite hastily because I didn't have an antenna for the low bands and I wanted to do CQ worldwide. And I had a support that wasn't as high as this. I didn't have a 29 meter support. I had probably a 20 meter support underneath one of the beams on the tower. So I put this antenna up with a 20 meter height here, single counterpoise. It's pretty well a half wavelength on 160 meters. And I found that it worked really well in the contest. I did very well at 160 meters and 80 meters in that contest with this antenna. I had this Granada balun I designed with the 3 stacks of toroids. So this is a fairly heavy duty balun. The Granada balun is not a new design, but the idea of stacking the toroids, it just gives me a little bit more power capacity. And I had no problems in the contest running with this arrangement. And that particular balun arrangement and the original wiring has been in place for more than 10 years. So that really hasn't given me a problem. If you're running lower power, you probably only need one toroid on each side, and that would also suffice. So put this antenna up, worked really well, decided that I would like to try and improve it, increase the height to 29 meters, still had just a single counterpoise here, Y3, kept the dimensions the same, and yes, definitely works better if you can get the top up to 29 meters. It's quite a decent antenna on 160, and also 80 meters. It gives a nice pattern, and at a slightly lower angle of radiation on 80 meters than what you'd find on 160. One really important point about this antenna is the coax choke. So I've got 45 turns of RG213 coax, 100mm diameter PVC pipe. This is pretty important to isolate the feed point from the coax line, and I found that to be a pretty effective choke. You're going to use quite a bit of coax to wind that choke, but it's worth it. So moving on, a good friend of mine, Steve, VK6VZ, who lives quite close to me, wanted an antenna for 160 and 80 meters that he could put above his quad. And one of the problems he had was that if you put an antenna above the quad there, and you've got a coax line and you've got extra weight, it's a little bit sometimes difficult to configure all of that. So it's quite interesting in doing this because obviously at the top of the antenna here, it's quite lightweight. The feed box and the balun and everything else and all the heavy coax is down the bottom, so it's easier to manage that in terms of weight perspective. So the loading on the lightweight extension he put on his tower at the top is quite low. And he was also interested in trying to use this on 40 meters. Now the antenna I designed more than 10 years ago didn't have 40 meters. It just had this single counterpoise. It worked on 80, it worked on 160, and it also worked quite well on 30 meters. But to get it to work on 40 meters, I found I needed to add an additional counterpoise wire, this 3-meter wire here, and that's all connected through to the balun, as you can see, Y1 and 3. That then gives a match on 40 meters. But Steve took this a step further. He decided he'd have a look and see what the match was like on all the other bands, and he found, probably to his surprise and my surprise, that on all the bands from 160 meters all the way through to 6 meters, there's a low impedance feed point here. And you could certainly match it with an ATU in most cases. So probably by chance, a little bit of luck, we've come up with an antenna here. It's quite a large antenna, obviously, but it works all the way from 160 meters all the way through to 6 meters with a low impedance and with the same coax choke in place. So that's quite interesting. The other interesting part to this antenna is we have actually designed and published another antenna which is half this size. It's half the height and half the length, and it essentially was designed for 80 meters and 40 meters, but we found with that we had usability and we had a relatively low impedance point on other HF bands. So I'm going to revisit that smaller antenna because this is a great antenna. If you've got a support height here of 29 meters or even 20 meters, it's going to work very well on the low bands. But a lot of people don't have this much space, so something a little bit smaller might work. And I can experiment with putting a second counterpoise on the half-size version. So that's about it for now. 73s for now from me, Kevin, VK6 Lima Whiskey.